Skillshare is for designers, photographers, marketers, artists, and lifelong learners. Skillshare is for foodies, commuters, risk takers, the young, and the young at heart. It's for strategists, free spirits, purists, the bold, the curious, the characters, the makers, and the breakers. Skillshare is for everyone, an online learning community with thousands of classes to advance your career, improve the world, and pursue the work you love. What will you learn next? It all starts on Skillshare.
Now we're going to talk about the run-on sentence, and there's various issues involved here, and there's even various names, and so you shouldn't be confused by that. Sometimes we refer to the run-on sentence, sometimes the comma splice, sometimes the fused sentence, as in two sentences that are fused together. But I'll explain those. But first, I want to discuss what we call the run-on sentence, because that name causes some confusion. Sometimes students think that what we're referring to is a sentence that is too long, just a long sentence, as in the colloquial term of somebody who runs on. He ran on and on, he wouldn't stop talking, but that's not what we're talking about in terms of the run-on sentence. So this does not have anything to do with a sentence being too long. There's no length rule for a sentence. William Faulkner, the great American novelist of the mid-20th century, typically wrote sentences that were 500 words long. James Joyce's Ulysses contains a sentence that is more than 4,000 words long. So there's no requirement that a sentence be cut off at any particular length. So that's the first thing. And I'm going to go forward and we'll start to understand what we mean by a run-on sentence, or perhaps you'd understand it better if we talk about the fused sentence. That is two sentences that are fused together, which in fact is what it is that we're talking about. So following up on the idea about the length of a sentence, and that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about the run-on sentence, keep in mind that a run-on sentence can be relatively short, as in the sentences that we have here. The boy hit the ball, he ran to first base. Okay, that's a run-on sentence, and I'll explain why it is. And also the twin of the run-on sentence, which would be the comma splice. The boy hit the ball, comma, he ran to first base. Both of these are incorrect, and they're as equally incorrect as the sentence fragment, and I'll be explaining why as we go forward. One way to think about the fused sentence is that it is the flip side of the sentence fragment. If you remember from our conversation about the sentence fragment, in a sense, has too little of a sentence in it to be a sentence. Well, in the same way, the run-on sentence and the comma splice sentence, what we're calling the fused sentences, two different kinds of the fused sentences, have too much in it to be a sentence, to be a proper sentence. In a sense, it's cramming two sentences into the same space, much like as in our illustration here, we attempted to cram two cars into the same space on the street. What you end up with is, besides a collision, you end up with the two cars fused together at the bumper, which is not the proper way for cars to be joined, right? Anyway, so you can also think of the fused sentence as being the writing equivalent of speaking rapidly and not taking a break, as if you or somebody else were saying something like, the boy hit the ball, he ran to first base. You see, there's no break in there, but there has to be. Anyway, but that's what we're going to be talking about. So the analogy I used above is that the run-on sentence, or the comma splice sentence, is actually an attempt to jam two sentences together without proper conjunction. And so that conjunction, and if you remember back to the conjunction function, that becomes very important in dealing with this type of grammatical issue. And we see below the example of the run-on sentence, the boy hit the ball, he ran to first base. You see, so, and you can see in green and blue the two independent clauses, what should be sentences by themselves, what could be sentences by themselves, are illustrated, and the comma splice, the boy hit the ball, comma, he ran to first base. That comma cannot serve as a conjunction or a joining device between the two independent clauses, between what could be two sentences. Okay, so that's where the mistake is. And as we go forward, we're going to take a look at what we can do to correct that error. A digression for a moment, or a tale of a tale, as I title it up here. That is a tale, a story, and of a tale, which is what the comma looks like sometimes, doesn't it? Anyway, but what we should remember, what we always need to remember, is there's no absolute right or wrong in any of these things, which does not mean that you can violate any rule, because they're not absolute. In a sense, they are held together by the conventions of our society and the conventions of our communication. But what is allowed in one language is not in another. And sometimes what is allowed in one language at a particular period in time is not allowed in another period of time. And a good example of this can be seen in the opening sentence of Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities. Now, he does something here that, as an English instructor, I would not allow. And what he does is he joins a long series of independent clauses together with commas. So let's take a look at this, and I'll read this and follow along and look at the commas that I've marked in red as joining these independent clauses. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. So you see, now, if I received young Charles Dickens' paper, or his short story, or his novel even, today, written like this with all these commas, I might be tempted to say, comma splice. You can't do this. You have to use periods or conjunctions. But in his day, it was evidently allowed, or he took poetic liberty. But in our day, you cannot write like this. So anyway, but just remember, as always, there's nothing in language that's absolute. It's all a matter of the conventions and the rules of the day. Perhaps the first way, or if not the first, at least the simplest way, to fix the fused sentence condition is to create two sentences. That's simple enough, right? Put a period where you don't have anything, or where you have the comma. So up above we see two incorrect examples. The boy hit the ball, he ran to first base. That's with no comma break there, but just the run-on condition. Or alternatively, the boy hit the ball, comma, he ran to first base, which is also incorrect, and we should recognize that now. And so you see the correct version above as well. The boy hit the ball, period, he ran to first base. So if you have the run-on condition, one of the simplest ways to fix it is create two sentences rather than cram those two sentences into one sentence, which is terribly wrong. Okay, now we're going to go on and we're going to take a look at a few other ways that we have to fix this condition. The next way that we might consider fixing the run-on condition, the fused sentence condition, is to link with a coordinating conjunction. So remember, that's one of the fanboys. So and, but, or, so, words like those. So we have a couple examples here, or actually more than a couple. We have, what, 4? 1, 2, 3, 4 up above. Okay. The boy hit the ball and he ran to first base. So you see I've color-coded the two different independent clauses. And remember, those independent clauses could be sentences by themselves. And, right, I mean, we took a look at that in the example above. We saw that one of the ways to fix the fused sentence condition is actually create the two sentences out of the two independent clauses. But this is another way. We could use a coordinating conjunction. So the boy hit the ball and he ran to first base. The crowd cheered for, that's the coordinating conjunction, for the boy had hit the ball. The boy hit the ball, but, you see, he was thrown out at first. So the but there is the coordinating conjunction. And the boy hit the ball, semicolon, he ran to first base. And so in this way, I'm using the semicolon as a coordinating conjunction, which in a sense it is. And when we get to punctuation, I'll explain how that is so. But just take it on faith right now that we can use the semicolon as a coordinating conjunction to join within one sentence two independent clauses. That is, two clauses that could be sentences by themselves. And then we're going to go on. We're going to take a look at another way to join two fused sentences, or two sentences that have been fused together, and fix this condition. The next way we have of fixing the fused sentence condition is to create a complex sentence. And if you remember our discussion about sentences, what that involves is the use of the subordinating conjunction, one of the wabbits. And so we have some examples here. The first one being, because the boy hit the ball, he ran to first base. And so again, you've noticed I've color-coded. The dependent clauses are in green. The independent clauses are in black. And the subordinating conjunctions are red. So because would be the subordinating conjunction. Because the boy hit the ball would be the subordinate clause, and he ran to first base would be the independent clause, and so on and so forth. So the boy hit the ball before he ran to first base. So the before he ran to first base, we're making that clause subordinating, and the boy hit the ball would be the independent clause. And so this is what we know as a complex sentence. Another example would be after the boy hit the ball, he ran to first base. And again, the after the boy hit the ball would be the subordinate clause. He ran to first base would be the independent. And one last example would be the boy ran to first base, which would be the independent clause, while the crowd cheered. So while the crowd cheered would be the dependent clause or the subordinate clause. One last method we have of fixing the fused sentence condition is to create another kind of complex sentence. Only in this complex sentence, we don't employ one of the wabbits, one of the subordinating conjunctions. And we can take a look at the examples above, and we'll see that this possibility exists when both clauses in the run-on condition have the same subject. That is, the same person, place, or thing is performing the action. So we see above the incorrect version. The boy hit the ball, he ran to first base. So we should recognize this by now as a run-on sentence or a fused sentence condition. But we can drop the second subject and create a sentence such as the boy hit the ball and ran to first base. You see how that works? And so actually the second clause is not an independent clause. So we don't have a run-on condition. The second clause is defective. It'd be a fragment if it were punctuated as a sentence by itself. The next example, John cooked dinner, he proposed to his girlfriend. Now again, we should recognize this as a run-on sentence, or if there were a comma after dinner, it would be a comma splice. But again, because it is John who is both cooking dinner and proposing, we could write it, John cooked dinner and proposed to his girlfriend. The last example, the lion roared, it then went back to sleep. Again, we should recognize that as a fused sentence condition. A way to correct it would be to drop the it and insert a conjunction. The lion roared, but then went back to sleep. So both clauses have the single subject of the lion, but the second clause does not have the lion stated explicitly and is joined to the first clause with the conjunction. So this is the last way that we have of correcting the run-on condition, or the fused sentence condition, or the comma splice condition. So now again, you can use these tools to correct your own writing, and I urge you first to go to the Test Your Knowledge exercises in this section and just hone them, sharpen them. So you're able to recognize when you have the run-on condition or the fused sentence condition, and see if you can tell which method you might like to correct that condition.